History tells us of troubles with taxes. As it was yesterday, it's still the same. They'll tell you the tax man never relaxes. Cursing high taxes is our national game. Everyone knows that no matter how wary, taxes will get you, it's certainly clear. Governments change, but cartoons never vary. They all say we'll end in a barrel this year.
Excuse me, sir, but do you consider the mini barrel to be more fashionable?
Well, I'll tell you, in the old days, I would have been able to afford a full-size barrel. But with today's high taxes, I can only afford the mini model. That's what this picketing is about.
How do you feel about taxes?
Oh, having lived in 3 other countries, I find the tax system in this country is very, very fair. I personally use it as a form of savings, even though I don't get any interest for it.
Taxes? Right now, I couldn't care less. I don't make enough money to pay any. I wish I did, though.
Taxes? I think they're really too high.
How do you think I got my ulcer?
Taxes?
Hey, now tell him.
Personally, no complaints. I'd like to see better use of tax credits for certain lower middle income groups, but basically the system is sound.
If I told you, I'd probably break your camera, and you wouldn't be able to use it on TV anyway.
I promised myself if I ever made enough money to pay taxes, I wouldn't mind a bit.
Oh, man, I just love paying taxes. It really makes my day.
Well, give me a year and I'll think of something funny to say. In the meantime, it hurts.
How do you feel about taxes?
That's a sore question to be asking working people. You mean, do I like taxes? Do I look crazy?
Well, as you've seen, opinions are divided. But it's pretty evident that paying taxes is not America's favorite indoor sport. I'm Richard Bayside, and I'm here to talk about taxes and how they came about. No, hold on, don't run away. I'm not offering a Hitchcock thriller, but I can give you some little-known facts about a very well-known institution. And when tax time comes around again, it may save you a lot of energy and maybe even some money. That's an offer you can't refuse. 200 years ago, a lot of us got hot under the collar about some taxes the British Parliament said we had to pay. I seem to recall it stirred up a bit of commotion and resulted in some pretty serious consequences.
And the other day, the folks round here were mad about the taxes, and so we went like Indians dressed to split the chest with axes. We made a plaguey mess of tea in one of the world's big dishes. I mean, we steeped it in the sea and treated all the fishes. Fal-de-ral-de-ra, fal-de-ral-de-ray, treated all the fishes.
The British are battering down our doors, and yet we continue to quibble. I've drafted these Articles of Confederation, and I say we must vote them in or vote them down.
Mr. Dickinson, your Articles of Confederation make no provision for taxes.
Sir.
How can we supply an army without money?
Sir, the colonies will never permit the Continental Congress to tax the people directly.
We'll be in perpetual debt.
How can we persuade colonists that they ought to allow us to tax them when we've been telling them the British have no right to do it? We're at war over this very issue.
Gentlemen, please, order.
So the colonies would not permit the Continental Congress to tax the people directly. The colonies did the taxing, well, such as it was, and turned the money over to the Congress. But the war debt was considerable, and the Constitutional Convention at war's end empowered Congress to raise money by an excise on products, avoiding a direct tax on the people.
'Tis Hamilton's doing that burdens our labor to bind us forever in taxes and chains. Let him send excisemen seeking the duty. 'Tis hot tar and feathers they'll get for their pains. We humble King George till he gave in and quit. To tyrants homegrown we will never submit.
Can you imagine this happening to a modern IRS representative? Anyway, the western Pennsylvania farmers made whiskey to sell in the east because there were no roads to transport their grain. The so-called whiskey rebels were of no mind to pay a tax, let me tell you. But now, President Washington stepped in and exercised his constitutional power by mobilizing a force of 15,000 state militia to gain control of the rebellious area. And once more, the whiskey tax was duly collected. I'm not so sure it was a wise public relations move. In the next election, practically all the West went over to Jefferson and his Republicans. I almost forgot to tell you. When Jefferson became president, all internal taxes went right out the window. Tariffs provided all the revenue. Alas, the War of 1812 came along. Congress again adopted internal taxes and then promptly repealed them when the war was over. As you see, internal taxation was always unpopular with our lawmakers. Congratulations, Mr. Bardwell, on your appointment. Must be exciting to be the first of anything. As first Commissioner of Internal Revenue, you've taken on quite a responsibility, especially now.
Thank you, sir. It's a great honor. I'll do my best. But with this war, I don't know.
What is the news from Gettysburg?
Lee is in full retreat. The casualties are heartbreaking. What waste. What a waste. And no end in sight. The cost could bury us. It's fortunate Congress finally passed an income tax law. Excuse me.
Excuse me, sir. May I have a word with you?
Yes, of course, Mr. Sadler.
We have a problem.
Good Lord.
800 letters a day, sir, all requesting information.
Well, I'll have to get you some help. But we'll hire another clerk first thing tomorrow morning.
Thank you, sir.
It turned out he needed more than one. Boutwell had no inkling of how big a job it was. In his first 6 months, he hired 3,800 people. After the war, Congress once again eliminated all taxes. But we'd had our first experience with the income tax. The next time the issue came up was in 1893, after 4 million Americans lost their jobs. The country was in turmoil, and reactions were passionate.
The passage of this bill will mark the dawn of a brighter day, with more of sunshine, more of the songs of birds, more of that sweetest music, the sound of laughter of children, well fed, well clothed, well housed. God hasten the era of equality in taxation and in opportunity.
You're right. Pass this income tax bill, and you will see the victory of socialism, communism, devilism. Free enterprise will be stifled, and our great democracy endangered forever.
The bill in question proposed a modest 2% tax on incomes of $4,000 and over. Now, in 1895, $4,000 had the purchasing power of over $40,000 today. Yet Joseph Choate, Dean of the New York Bar, told the Supreme Court that the bill was a communist march against private property. After much backstage bickering, the court voted 5-4 against the bill. But the New York World editorialized, another victory of greed over need, and a proof that entrenched wealth will never willingly pay its share toward the support of the government. It took close to 20 years to reopen the issue.
Get those Eastern fat cats off our backs.
Get rid of the tariffs.
Yeah, the tariffs. They let the corporations get rich and let the poor farmers go to hell.
Gentlemen, please.
Yeah, we feed the cities and starve ourselves.
Gentlemen, will you let me explain?
What's the new amendment for if you're not going to use it? Tax the corporations. That's where the money
Gentlemen, the revenue the government needs.
We have an income tax.
If you folks had only let me talk, I could tell you I'm about to introduce an income tax bill.
Cordell Hull's bill was passed. A 1% tax on incomes over $3,000 and a surtax of up to 6% on incomes over $500,000. The good old days. 1 to 6%. Anyway, the bill also provided for withholding taxes at the source from dividends, interest payments, rent, salaries, and wages. Mr. Hull didn't know it, but he'd introduced the income tax just in time. Of course, we needed a lot more money to finance World War I, an estimated $35 billion. After the war, a relieved America plunged into a decade of peace and prosperity. Taxes were cut 5 times. The living was easy and optimistic. In 1925, the Prohibition Unit of the Internal Revenue Bureau had its busiest year as an enforcement agency. There were many who broke the law, and the golden goose of syndicated crime fattened in a land of high spirits and easy money. As late as October 1929, the American public was reassured that the fundamental business of the country is on a sound and prosperous basis. 2 weeks later, the boom busted. And it came to pass, the famine was sore in the land. But the era of the common man was on its way with social and economic reforms that would sharply increase the scope and function of the federal government. This meant more federal spending, more taxation, and greater responsibility for the Bureau of Internal Revenue. The Social Security Tax Division was set up in 1937 to collect payroll taxes to support this vast program of retirement payments, unemployment insurance, and aid for the needy. By 1938, the Bureau's personnel had doubled, and so had collections.
Fly Depot. Oh, yes, sir. Yes, sir. Just a minute, sir. I better write this down. That's 2,000 planes plus glider for paratroop. Yes, sir. 250 destroyers. Excuse me, sir. We're trying to fight a war here. I beg your pardon, sir. Yes, sir. 3,000 assault craft, 2,500 tanks, 4,000 trucks, 100,000 packs of chewing gum. Got it, sir. Oh, by the way, sir, when are you going to need all this? June 6, 1944. Right, sir. We'll be ready, sir. Bye.
June 6, 1944. D-Day. The beginning of the end. The cost of World War II meant a 6-fold increase in taxes. Before the war, the income tax affected some 8 million payers. Now, tens of millions were involved. New forms of tax collection had to be devised. The system was streamlined. The short form, known as 1040A, was introduced. The withholding principle returned, this time to stay. A small taxpayer could use his withholding receipts as tax returns. And millions of citizens were relieved of having to file their declarations of estimated tax. Excuse me, sir. Tell me, is it customary at these meetings to exhibit your beliefs so conspicuously, or are political buttons your hobby?
Oh, no hobby. I just like to ride with the tide, you know what I mean? Be sure no one thinks I'm prejudiced one way or the other. Know what I mean? Give a little, take a little, right? Be safe.
This accommodating gentleman apparently is unaware that the Bureau has just been completely reorganized. has not only been renamed the Internal Revenue Service, but more important, it was taken out of politics completely. Except for the appointed commissioner, only highly trained and classified civil servants will now administer the service to provide, as the president requested, better machinery for assuring honest and impartial administration of the internal revenue laws.
Class, your last homework assignment dealt with taxes. Now, who can tell me just how taxes and tax laws came about?
Yeah, sure. About taxes, I know. The president is the boss. When from him comes the word about taxes. That's how he pays the bills, like you and me. Understand?
Well, there is a little bit more to it than that, Mr. Reinhardt. Yes, Mrs. Ramirez.
I think I can explain.
Why, yes, of course. We would be very glad to hear your explanation.
The Constitution says that all bills for raising money must start in the House of Representatives. Now, these taxes pay for our national and foreign programs, and so most of them come from the president and his advisors. Then the Treasury Department writes these proposals up into tax bills so that the Ways and Means Committee of the House of Representatives can discuss them in public hearings. They are sometimes changed or even rewritten, sometimes dropped entirely. But it is the Congress who must vote the bill into law like any other bill. The president can sign or veto it. The Congress, of course, can override the veto. Oh, I almost forgot. The bill can also originate from a senator, a member of Congress, or even a private citizen speaking to his elected representative. Thank you.
Thank you, Miss Ramirez. That is exactly right.
Well, maybe the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee could have done better, but I don't know how. Now let's see if we can find out what it means to implement a tax law. And that's where the IRS comes in.
I'm Dick Greenstein with the IRS in Washington. Now, when a tax bill becomes law, we must take hundreds of legal provisions and make them into understandable rules for taxpayers to follow. As you know, tax bills are often passed late in the year, but the IRS must be ready to go on January 1. To do that, we set up a task force. First, we need technical legal interpretations so that we can make our rules, print our tax forms, and train our people to help taxpayers. Computer programming, budget, personnel needs are some of the other areas we must consider. Now, here's how a typical task force might go. Gail, how do we stand on the taxpayer service parts of this new tax law?
Well, we're waiting for training materials. We have 3,000 people out all over the nation waiting to be trained, and we can't do anything until we get the new provisions in our training material.
And at this point, the training schedule is delayed because we need some technical interpretations that are not yet available. Until we get those, then we're stymied. We just can't move any further.
Well, we're working on those as fast as we can, but we have to get the 1040 tax package out, and we can't do one until we've done the other.
Dick, how is the 1040 tax package coming?
Well, it's coming fine, except we don't have the input from technical that we need. There were some last-minute revisions to the Act that have not been incorporated into the form, and until they are, this thing is pretty much useless for training or anything.
We'll put some more people on it to try to speed it up.
Good. Howie, how's the budget coming?
Dick, we estimate that the preliminary cost of implementation of the new law to be in the neighborhood of $47 million.
Isn't that higher than we originally estimated?
What isn't higher these days?
Well, I think I ought to point out that the printing costs are going to be even higher. We've got additional costs because of the delays. The printers are working overtime, and we've got paper storage costs.
What does that mean in terms of time? When can we get the materials to our people to train them?
I think, based on what I'm hearing, that it will be a 2 or 3 week delay. in terms of having the training materials ready. And then that will give us about 3 weeks to train your 3,000 people.
Well, somehow we're going to have to cut through this red tape, and we're going to have to be ready on January 1st.
But the law affects us most directly when we file our tax return. So let's have a look at what happens to it. It is received here and sorted and checked to make sure necessary information is included. Editing marks indicate what information is to be computerized. Relevant data goes on tape, which is then flown to the National Computer Center in Martinsburg, West Virginia. About 3/4 of all returns are marked for refund. Apparently, many of us use the Internal Revenue Service like a Christmas club by having more taxes withheld than necessary. The IRS handles 100 million plus tax returns every year. If every taxpayer with a problem came to the IRS in Washington, that would mean chaos. That's why the organization was decentralized. And each citizen can settle his tax affairs locally at one of the hundreds of branches set up to service him. Let's take a look at a district office and see how it functions. I've conducted quite a few random interviews. The fact is, most people are not aware of the service functions of the district office. More important, people just don't think of the IRS as a place to turn to for help in solving tax problems.
Well, I guess the image of the relentless tax collector is even older than the Bible. And old beliefs die hard. Of course, the IRS is not just a collecting organization, but a complex agency with many administrative responsibilities. Our employee plan activity protects the retirement incomes of some 30 million Americans. Our tax-exempt function monitors tax-exempt organizations, and our intelligence division investigates tax fraud. Collections and tax audits to make sure that all pay their fair share are also conducted from this office.
Well, it may be just the tremendous scope of IRS activity that gives people the feeling of confronting a huge and indifferent bureaucratic power.
Well, I don't see how any large organization can avoid all bureaucratic routine, but we really do try to humanize our contact with each person. Here, let's take a look for a moment.
Bueno, no entiendo esto. ¿Usted me puede explicar más o menos qué significa?
Bueno, es verdad que el formulario largo demora un poquito más tiempo, pero en fin usted sale con un poco más dinero.
Oh, muchas gracias. ¿Sí me puede comprar un carro?
Oh, claro que sí.
Is that another service of your district office?
Oh, no. IRS offices throughout the country are geared to provide help in foreign languages wherever it's necessary. We also conduct free seminars for small businesses, farmers, professionals, even people who make out other people's returns.
Your people must get some pretty wild questions.
Oh, no doubt about it. They deal directly with the public, and they've heard them all. Oh, good morning. There is always someone who wants to know how they can claim their pet as a dependent.
You're kidding.
No, I'm serious. And so are the people asking the questions, so we do our best to answer them all. We also put out dozens of free publications each year, one for just about any tax question you can think of. We distribute millions of these every year. We're trying to overcome the traditional tabloid image of being the taxpayer's antagonist.
You see, Mr. Douglas, you did have tax withheld from your salary, but your income wasn't high enough to require filing a return. So you're entitled to a refund. All we have to do is fill out this form.
I know it's a fashionable convention to picture the IRS as going after our last dime.
Well, actually, we're only interested in the taxpayer paying the correct amount, no more and no less. I think people are beginning to realize that. More and more people are consulting our assisters all the time, and they don't even have to come in personally. Toll-free telephone service is available in all 50 states to most taxpayers. I sure wish they'd read the instructions first, though. Saves ourselves a lot of time and them as well.
During the fact, you may claim your son as a dependent. Yes, that's right, even though he has some income of his own. We'll send you a pamphlet explaining the requirements. Now, where should I...
We want the taxpayers to know that we're here to help. After all, they are the ones that we really work for.
Well, I guess about the only other thing you could do would be to pay our taxes for us.
Every year, taxpayers compute their income, their deductions, and their exemptions, and then file their tax returns. I'm always amazed and proud that we have the most effective tax system in the world.
You know, it might just be that we all deserve a little more credit than we give ourselves. Thank you. You've been a great help.
Thank you.
Oh. You know, if there's one thing I'm lousy at is figures. There's one thing that drives me up a wall. It's paperwork involving figures. And if there's one thing I hate, it's making out my income tax. But I do it, well, not just because it's a law, but because I agree with Justice Holmes that taxes are what we pay for a civilized society. No, I'm not a flag waver. And I'm not blind to much that needs improvement in our land. But if I had a choice, I'd still choose this country to bring up my kids. So, I'll continue going through this yearly exercise in frustration. After I make darn sure I've availed myself of the maximum possible legal deductions.
You hurry to the scenes of disaster. No one can equal the deeds you have done. You help the weary, the weak, and the aged, building security second to none. You keep our shores from the anger of strangers. You keep our land from contagion of fright. You keep the flag, its stars and its furrows, proudly still waving by dawn's early light. You get the job done, you carry the ball. You pay the taxes, so you do it